Have you ever heard a simple phrase that left you feeling uneasy, but you couldn't quite explain why? Sometimes, the most dangerous emotional red flags aren't loud or obvious. They're hidden in casual words that slowly chip away at your peace of mind. Especially after 60, recognizing these subtle signs can save you years of confusion, stress, and heartache. In this video, we're uncovering 5 phrases that seem harmless but secretly reveal deep psychological danger. If you value your independence, dignity, and emotional well-being, this is a conversation you can't afford to miss. Let's get into it, because your peace is priceless. The hidden threat of control. It often starts with something small. Maybe she says, "I just want what's best for you," or, "I think you'd be happier if you didn't spend time with them." On the surface, these words might seem thoughtful, even caring. But if you listen closely and look deeper, they may carry a warning. Because when concern turns into control, the damage doesn't just affect your schedule. It eats away at your freedom, confidence, and peace of mind. Control in relationships doesn't always come with shouting, ultimatums, or slammed doors. Sometimes it's subtle. It hides in the tone of a question, the framing of a suggestion, or the quiet pressure to change your choices to meet someone else's standards. And for older adults, especially those over 60, this kind of emotional manipulation can be especially dangerous. Let's take the story of Harold. At 75, he was enjoying retirement, gardening, meeting friends for breakfast, and spending weekends visiting his grandkids. When he met a new partner, things started off beautifully. She was attentive, helpful, and seemed to genuinely care about his well-being. At first, she'd ask things like, "Who are you meeting today?" Or, "Do you think it's a good idea to spend money on that?" Harold took it as affection. He thought, "She's just looking out for me." But over time, the questions became judgments, the suggestions became instructions, and Harold realized he was no longer deciding his day, she was. She didn't like certain friends, so he stopped seeing them. She criticized how he spent his money, so he changed his habits. She began micromanaging his time, subtly implying that his choices were irresponsible, or worse, selfish. This is the hidden threat of control. It doesn't always scream, it whispers. And by the time you realize what's happening, you've handed over pieces of your life without even knowing it. Psychologically, being in a controlling relationship creates a state of chronic stress. Your brain's fear center, the amygdala, stays activated as you constantly second-guess yourself. This leads to elevated cortisol levels, the body's stress hormone, which affects everything from memory and concentration to your immune system and heart health. In your later years, when your body and mind need calm and stability, this kind of stress can be deeply harmful. What's worse is that control often comes disguised as protection. It's framed as love. "I just don't want you to make mistakes. You're not thinking clearly." Or the worst of all, "If you really loved me, you'd do it my way." These aren't just statements, they're emotional traps. And once you fall into them, it becomes harder to speak up or push back, because you're afraid of being painted as unreasonable, selfish, or ungrateful. But here's the truth. Real love respects autonomy. A healthy partner doesn't need to control your decisions to feel secure. They support your independence, even when they disagree. They offer their perspective, but they don't override yours. They walk beside you, not ahead of you with a leash. If any of this sounds familiar, it's time to pause and reflect. Has your partner made you feel guilty for making your own choices? Do you find yourself hiding things or hesitating to speak your mind just to avoid conflict? That's not care. That's control. Harold eventually saw it clearly. He realized he wasn't in a partnership. He was in a cage. And once he reclaimed his independence, he found something he hadn't felt in years: peace. In your golden years, your life should be shaped by mutual respect, not quiet manipulation. Your time is too valuable, your identity too sacred, to be controlled by someone else's insecurities. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. And the earlier you recognize it, the faster you can protect what matters most: your freedom, your dignity, and your peace. The disrespect disguised as humor. It often starts with a laugh. Maybe she teases you in front of friends saying, "Oh, don't mind him. He forgets everything these days." Or maybe she jokes, "That outfit makes you look like someone's grandpa." Everyone chuckles. You force a smile. But deep down, something feels off. It's not funny. It's not playful. It stings. Disrespect rarely enters a relationship loudly. Instead, it sneaks in through sarcasm, passive-aggressive jabs, and jokes that cut a little too deep. And the most dangerous part? It's easy to excuse. "She's just joking. I'm being too sensitive. It's not worth starting an argument." But the truth is, repeated disrespect, no matter how it's delivered, is one of the clearest signs that a relationship is losing its foundation. Take George, for example. He's 72, a retired teacher, respected by his community, and proud of the quiet life he's built. When his partner first started teasing him, it seemed innocent enough. A comment about his hearing here, a jab about his driving there. At first, he played along. He didn't want to seem uptight. But soon the tone changed. The jokes became more pointed, especially when others were around. She'd cut him off mid-sentence or roll her eyes when he spoke. Sometimes she'd laugh and say, "You're just not as sharp as you used to be." It wore him down. He found himself speaking less, keeping his opinions to himself, and avoiding conversations altogether just to sidestep the ridicule. What once felt like a loving relationship began to feel like a performance, one where he was the punchline. Here's what many people overlook. Disrespect disguised as humor is still disrespect. In fact, it can be even more harmful because it's harder to call out. If you react, you risk being labeled too sensitive or unable to take a joke. So you stay quiet. You tolerate it. And slowly, it chips away at your confidence, your voice, and your sense of value. Psychologically, this kind of emotional erosion activates the same stress mechanisms in the brain as direct verbal abuse. It triggers your fight-or-flight response, increases cortisol levels, and leads to emotional fatigue. Over time, it can contribute to anxiety, depression, and social withdrawal, especially in older adults who may already be facing challenges like retirement transitions, health concerns, or shrinking social circles. But here's the truth. No one, at any age, should be the butt of a partner's jokes. Real intimacy doesn't involve humiliation. A respectful partner doesn't need to put you down to feel smart or funny. They build you up. They listen, they support, and yes, they can joke with you, but never at the cost of your dignity. If your partner's words consistently leave you feeling embarrassed, dismissed, or belittled, even if they're wrapped in laughter, that's a red flag. It's not about having thin skin. It's about recognizing when your value is being chipped away, one joke at a time. George eventually found his voice. After months of silence, he calmly but firmly told his partner that her comments weren't funny. They were hurtful. Her reaction told him everything he needed to know. She laughed it off again, minimizing his feelings. That's when he knew it wasn't just a bad habit. It was a lack of respect. He made the brave choice to distance himself from the relationship. And in doing so, he regained not just his voice, but his sense of peace. In your later years, relationships should be your safe place, not a stage where you're constantly ridiculed. If someone laughs at your expense, especially when you've told them it hurts, they're not joking, they're disrespecting you, and you deserve better. Because growing older doesn't mean growing smaller. You deserve relationships that make you feel seen, heard, and valued, not laughed at. The slow poison of constant criticism. It doesn't hit all at once. In fact, it often starts so quietly, you don't even notice it at first. a small comment about how you folded the laundry, a sigh when you forget to lock the door, a remark about how you always leave the kitchen light on. Tiny things, brushed off as harmless, but over time, they build. And what starts as the occasional complaint becomes a steady stream of negativity that slowly drowns your confidence. This is the slow poison of constant criticism. And for many older adults, it's one of the most damaging dynamics in a relationship because it doesn't just hurt your feelings, it erodes your sense of self. Criticism, in its healthy form, can be helpful. It can offer feedback, encourage growth, and improve communication. But when it becomes a habit, when every word, action, or decision you make is met with disapproval, it shifts from guidance to degradation. It creates an environment where you feel like nothing you do is ever good enough. And that kind of emotional pressure is exhausting. Take Joe, for example. He's 78, a retired high school teacher, known for his patience and generosity. When he first moved in with his partner, he expected the usual adjustments, getting used to routines, learning each other's habits. But slowly, the comments started piling up. Why do you always take so long to get ready? That's not how you wash the dishes. You never remember anything anymore. Why would you wear that? At first, Joe thought she was just stressed or having a bad day. But it never stopped. No matter how hard he tried to please her, there was always something wrong. His clothes, his driving, his hobbies, even how he laughed. Nothing was safe from scrutiny. Eventually, Joe stopped trying. He kept quiet, avoided initiating conversations, and withdrew from the activities he once enjoyed, because everything felt like a setup for criticism. And the worst part? He started believing her, that maybe he really wasn't good enough anymore. Psychologically, this kind of chronic criticism is a form of emotional abuse. It activates the brain's threat response, constantly putting you on edge, triggering anxiety, and releasing stress hormones like cortisol. Over time, this can damage not just your emotional health, but your physical health too, contributing to sleep issues, high blood pressure, and even a weakened immune system. For seniors, the effects are magnified. You may already be dealing with reduced energy, changing routines, or health concerns. Adding a constant stream of criticism into the mix creates a toxic emotional load that's difficult to carry. What makes constant criticism especially dangerous is that it often disguises itself as help or honesty. A partner might say, "I'm just trying to help you improve," or "You need someone to be real with you." But real support uplifts. It doesn't tear you down over and over again. If this sounds familiar, ask yourself, do I feel like I'm walking on eggshells? Do I hide parts of myself to avoid judgment? Have I stopped doing things I enjoy because I'm tired of hearing they're wrong? If the answer is yes, it's time to take a hard look at what's happening. Joe eventually did. After confiding in an old friend, he realized that what he was experiencing wasn't love. It was control through constant disapproval. And he decided to set boundaries. It wasn't easy. But the moment he stopped accepting the criticism as truth, he began to rediscover his confidence. In a healthy relationship, you should feel supported, not inspected, encouraged, not picked apart. You deserve to be with someone who sees your efforts, appreciates your uniqueness, and builds you up, not someone who constantly looks for reasons to tear you down. Because criticism, when unchecked, doesn't just poison the relationship, it poisons how you see yourself. And you've come too far in life to let someone else rewrite your worth with their negativity. The void of emotional withdrawal. Sometimes, the most painful words aren't angry, they're cold. When a woman says, "I don't care anymore," it may sound like frustration in the moment, but don't ignore it. That phrase often marks the start of something deeper and far more dangerous. Emotional withdrawal. Not yelling, not arguing, just silence, indifference, distance. And that can be more devastating than any loud fight, because emotional withdrawal isn't about losing your voice. It's about losing your connection. This kind of detachment doesn't happen overnight. It sneaks in quietly. First, she stops asking how your day was. Then she stops listening when you tell her. Conversations shrink into one-word answers. Physical affection fades, eye contact disappears, and suddenly you're living in the same house, but it feels like you're completely alone. Take George, a 74-year-old retiree who once shared a warm, connected relationship. He and his partner used to laugh over morning coffee, take walks together, talk for hours. But gradually, the energy changed. She stopped looking up when he entered the room. She began replying with "uh-huh" instead of full sentences. At first, he thought maybe she was just tired, or preoccupied, or needed space. Then one day, during an argument, she said it. "I don't care anymore." Those 4 words hit harder than any insult, because they weren't about the fight, they were about everything. Her tone, her posture, her energy, it all screamed the same thing: "I've checked out." And here's the danger. Emotional withdrawal doesn't just hurt your feelings, it empties the relationship of life. Psychologists call this the shutdown phase. It often follows unresolved conflict, long-standing resentment, or emotional exhaustion. But whatever the cause, the result is the same. One partner detaches, stops investing emotionally, and becomes emotionally unavailable. For the other partner, this leads to a deep sense of rejection and confusion. You start to feel invisible, like nothing you do matters, like your presence, your thoughts, even your love are no longer wanted. And for seniors, especially those already facing reduced social interaction or physical limitations, this emotional loss can be profoundly destabilizing. The emotional brain, particularly in older adults, craves connection. We're wired to need closeness, to seek out comfort and care. When that's gone, the psychological toll can be steep. Increased anxiety, depression, feelings of abandonment, and even physical symptoms like fatigue, insomnia, or heart strain. Over time, that emotional emptiness seeps into every corner of your life. And unlike open conflict, emotional withdrawal is hard to confront, because there's nothing to argue with, no raised voices, no dramatic moments, just silence, just distance. It leaves you stuck, unsure whether to fix things, fight for attention, or simply walk away. George found himself in that exact place, trapped in a house full of quiet tension, hoping things would magically go back to how they used to be. But deep down, he knew the bond had frayed too far. His partner wasn't just pulling away, she had already let go. It was George who hadn't. Eventually, he had to ask himself the hard question: if I feel completely alone in this relationship, am I really in one at all? That realization gave him the clarity to make a choice, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. He didn't deserve to spend his final decades in emotional exile, and neither do you. If you've noticed your partner pulling away, if you feel like you're doing all the talking, all the giving, all the trying, don't ignore that feeling. Don't let yourself become numb to the distance. Emotional withdrawal is a quiet destroyer, but it's also a sign, one that tells you it's time to either fight for reconnection or protect your peace. Because at this stage of life, you deserve warmth. You deserve presence. You deserve to be seen, heard, and cared for. Don't settle for silence, the destruction of blame and resentment. There's a certain phrase that, once spoken, changes everything. This is all your fault. It's sharp, it's loaded, and it carries more than just anger. It carries blame. And when blame becomes a pattern in a relationship, it doesn't just start fights. It builds walls. It replaces partnership with polarization and love with resentment. Blame is the quiet destroyer of connection. At first, it might show up as irritation over little things, forgetting to buy something at the store, being late for dinner, choosing the wrong words in a conversation. But over time, those small frustrations grow into sweeping accusations. Everything becomes your fault. Every issue, every emotion, every setback. Somehow, you're always the one to blame. That's what happened to Harold, a 79-year-old who thought he and his partner had weathered the hardest parts of life together. They'd raised children, paid off the house, faced retirement as a team. But somewhere along the line, something shifted. The tension became constant, and instead of working through things together, she turned on him. "If you hadn't made that decision, we wouldn't be in this mess. You're the reason I'm unhappy. I wasted my best years on you." At first, Harold tried to reason with her. Then he tried apologizing for everything, even things he hadn't done, just to keep the peace. But it didn't matter. The blame kept coming, and with it, something worse: resentment. Resentment is the silent companion of blame. It simmers just beneath the surface, turning every interaction into an emotional minefield. Every word feels like an accusation. Every silence feels like punishment. And every disagreement becomes an opportunity to reopen old wounds, rehash past mistakes, and reinforce the idea that you are the problem. Psychologically, this creates a damaging dynamic known as negative attribution. That means your partner stops seeing your actions in good faith. Even when you try to help, they assume bad intentions. And once that happens, the relationship becomes a battlefield, not a sanctuary. The toll on your mental and emotional health can be enormous. Constant blame and resentment trigger your brain's stress response, elevating cortisol, reducing your ability to think clearly, and increasing anxiety, guilt, and emotional exhaustion. For seniors, the effects are even more pronounced. Chronic stress in older adults is linked to heart disease, cognitive decline, and decreased immune function. But the damage doesn't stop with you. These dynamics often ripple out into your wider world. Friends and family begin to notice. There's tension at gatherings. People feel awkward. Some withdraw entirely, leaving you more isolated than ever. And as your support system shrinks, your ability to cope with the emotional strain disappears too. This is how blame and resentment destroy not just relationships, but your identity, your social life, and your peace of mind. And here's the painful truth. In many cases, that resentment isn't really about you. It's unresolved pain, disappointment, or dissatisfaction that your partner never learned how to process in a healthy way. So they project it. They turn you into the scapegoat. Because it's easier than facing the complexity of their own feelings, but that doesn't mean you have to carry it. Harold realized that no matter how many times he apologized, things weren't going to change. The issue wasn't what he did. It was that his partner had stopped seeing him with compassion, and that realization, as painful as it was, gave him freedom. He didn't need to stay in a relationship defined by blame. He chose dignity instead. If you constantly feel like the villain in your own relationship, it's time to step back and ask, is this about me or about something they're unwilling to face? Either way, you don't deserve to live under constant emotional attack. At this stage of life, your energy is sacred. Your self-worth is non-negotiable. And love, real love, isn't about blame. It's about growth, support, and choosing each other through the hard stuff, not weaponizing it. You've spent decades building your life. Don't let resentment tear it down. You deserve peace. You deserve fairness. You deserve a relationship where love isn't a burden, but a blessing. If any of these warning signs felt familiar, don't ignore them. Your peace, health, and happiness are worth protecting. You deserve relationships built on respect, not regret. If this video helped you see things more clearly, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a message that matters. Your next chapter should be your best one.